I trust you.
Okay.
You know more about this than I do. I'm just the communications guy.
It is my job. I hope I do.
Yeah.
It's my job.
Yeah. I hope you. If you don't, we're deep in trouble. Welcome, everyone, to the September 2025 edition of The Impact, a Sustainable CT podcast. For your edification, your enlightenment, and your entertainment, too. I'm Jim Hunt, Communications Director at Sustainable CT, so if you're looking for someone to blame for this podcast, well, you can blame me. But remember, this is never a one-way conversation. We always want to hear from you for our edification and enlightenment. Drop us a note, won't you, to info@sustainablect.org. The Impact is brought to you in part by the Tremaine Foundation. The Emily Hall Tremaine Foundation seeks and funds innovative projects that advance solutions to basic and enduring problems, and we are oh so glad they do. Visit them at tremainefoundation.org. Remember, we can't do any of what we do without you. We don't have a magical rainbow unicorn money tree, no sir, but you can be a Sustainable CT sponsor. Find out how at sustainablect.org. I am delighted to have Joanna Wozniak-Brown on the show today. Dr. Wozniak-Brown has nearly 2 decades of experience in environmental management and planning in Connecticut. Currently, she serves as the Climate and Infrastructure Policy Development Coordinator at the Connecticut Office of Policy and Management, OPM. She facilitates interagency collaboration on climate and sustainability issues. She advises on state-supported investment in climate resilience projects. She's also a member of the Connecticut Green Bank Board of Directors, and you know we love the Connecticut Green Bank. Joanna earned her PhD in Environmental Studies from Antioch University of New England, a Master's of Science from Johns Hopkins in Environmental Planning, go Blue Jays, and a BA from Drew University, go Rangers, in Political Science and Environmental Studies. Most relevant for our discussion today, Joanna is also the driving force behind Connecticut's Sustainability and Resiliency Week initiative, scheduled to take place on September 28th through October 4th. So I'm really looking forward to talking to her about that. Let's get on with it. Joanna Wozniak-Brown, welcome to The Impact. I'm glad you're here. Thank you so much for doing this. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Now, we're going to talk about Sustainability and Resiliency Week. Well, because that's coming up towards the end of September, kind of into October as well. How did Sustainability and Resiliency Week come about, and how did you get involved with it?
Yeah, Sustainability and Resiliency Week this year, it's coming up September 28th to August 4th. Although folks, when you check out our website at portal.ct.gov/sustainability for more information, you'll see that there's some events before that week and after, because these topics are not limited to just a week. So we wanted to spread the wealth, especially if we know some organizations are setting up events.
Wait,
so
say that website address really slowly.
Yeah, sure. I was going to say it again for everybody so you won't forget.
Okay.
Portal.ct.gov/sustainability.
Perfect. Thank you.
And from there, you can get find the events. You can sign up for the newsletter, and you can also hear a little bit about how state agencies are involved in sustainability and resiliency. So this came about because there's a number of events that are happening along these similar themes that happen all over the world. For example, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania has had a Sustainability Week for the past 5 years.
Oh.
New York City has a Climate Week that has international acclaim. And having a Connecticut-focused week was a no-brainer, basically. We have incredible natural resources across our state. We're dealing with big issues like biodiversity loss and deadly floods and increasing economic pressures. But amidst all that, we have amazing state agency staff and municipalities and nonprofits that are working to address these challenges and protect our resources. So I really thought it was time for a Sustainability and Resiliency Week to let people know about all the work that's happening across the state and all the people that it takes to make it happen, because it doesn't happen in a vacuum. We all have to work together on it.
Yeah. Now, did you go to the governor one day and say, Ned, we really need to do this? How did it actually happen?
Essentially, basically, environmental causes have been a big focus for the governor, and so it wasn't even an ask I was worried about making. And then it was also talking to all of our state agency partners and seeing what they were interested in and how we might be able to partner on it. So it took a team effort.
Yeah. He's come around to this in the tenure in office. He's really become quite a champion for sustainability over the years. So, which leads me to a question about the evolution of climate resilience planning and what you've seen, how you've witnessed that change over the years in Connecticut. How has that changed for you from your perspective?
Oh, well, I guess what I would say, you're saying that the governor has come around, but I do want to say that his first executive order when he came into office was environmentally focused. Sure. So I don't think the governor has gone on a ramp up. He's been consistent in that message since he came to office. But generally, there has been a long evolution on climate resiliency, specifically in Connecticut, although Connecticut has followed the larger international evolution, where, a couple decades ago, even in the 90s, the focus was on greenhouse gas emissions, because we're recognizing more formally and having the science to prove it and all of the detections and the data coming together to show that emissions leads to climate change. We are also finally understanding that mitigation and resiliency have to happen together. Some purists used to think only mitigation, because mitigation or elimination of climate change is one of our best and most important ways to reduce our risks.
Yeah.
But now we know climate change is here and it's happening, and we have to take action on both. For example, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce just released a report, I think it was last week. They do it annually. They estimated that about $1 not invested in disaster resilience today can cost communities up to $33 in lost future economic activity. So I think a lot of folks sometimes think that it's a feel-good story. We're just doing the right thing. But no, it has real impacts on Connecticut residents and businesses and our ecosystems. But we've also been working really hard on, it's easy for people to understand what's happening in their neighborhood. So like, for example, folks along the coast, they know which intersections are getting flooded by king tides and they avoid those intersections. But we're starting to think about it. We've been thinking about it in a more organized and comprehensive way, especially since Superstorm Sandy and then Connecticut winning the National Disaster Resilience Competition really, I think, jump-started the work at a state level. And so over the past 10 to 15 years, our capacity has increased in the form of designated staff at the local and the state levels. And programs like Sustainable CT, I think those types of programs break down complex issues into reasonable action.
Yes, we do.
Yes, yeah. And you didn't ask me to say that either. But you're breaking those actions down at the scale of influence. And I think that that's what's critical for municipalities, because too often these things seem so big and they have to worry about day-to-day stuff of, like cleaning out the culverts and making sure the lights at the school turn on. But they have to think about these things as well. And so having dedicated staff and clear actions makes it easier to take them on. And even I've seen more and more consultants that have added both mitigation and resiliency services to their books of business. So that's been pretty exciting. Where I think it's going to go, this is just sort of educated speculation, but I think the next generation of climate focus is going to be in the data and the infrastructure financing spaces, with continued improvement on the multi-scalar governance aspects with better partnership and coordination and stuff.
I want to unpack a little bit of what you said now. Investing now to save money in the future. And we still have, for the last 30 years, this narrative has evolved over time in the environmental space and the sustainability space, where some of those vestiges still remain, where people say, oh, that's nice. That's something we should do. That would be good, but it's going to cost money. So I don't want to do that because it's just a nice thing I can't afford. And we keep coming to towns and finding more and more traction in the argument that, no, this is not about spending money. It's about saving money. And there is some initial investment you need to make up front, right? Everything, especially in mitigation, the area of mitigation. but it's really intended to be able to save money down the road. Because if you wait and put the stuff off, you're cutting off your nose to spite your face. And you would agree with that. So, yeah.
Oh, 100%. You really do. I mean, it's just like taking care of ourselves. We can't eat candy 3 meals a day,
Right.
Plus dessert, and then think that we won't have to pay the consequences later.
Right.
We have to show up consistently and in a dedicated way in order to make sure that we can be functioning and not just functioning, but thriving, right? I mean, this is not just coming down to whether we can just exist or not. If we don't do anything, it will come down to that. But we need to make sure that we are thriving and
Sure.
delivering on the Connecticut promise.
Yeah, we don't want the bread. We want the roses too. And I love the analogy of the whole nutrition analogy. It's like, yeah, we can invest a little bit in better food, to ensure a more healthy future. It does cost some money up front, but it really does save money down the road. And that is true. We find that constantly when we're working with towns in terms of reducing energy costs, doing all the normal, common sense things to reduce the use of energy. It saves towns money. And it has nothing to do with ideology, and it has nothing to do with whether or not you're a tree hugger and all the stuff. With all the political nonsense, it has to do with dollars and cents and saving your taxpayers money and making their life better down the road. You were nice and said Sustainable CT engages on that local level. It's really important. And I can speak from our perspective, but I know I've seen so many others do it locally. That local dynamic brings people in, makes them part of the process, so they have a sense of ownership and buy-in and efficacy. I mean, this is such a huge problem, not just statewide, but nationwide and worldwide. It can really feel overwhelming and feel like, well, there's nothing I can do, right? But if you're engaged locally on the ground doing these things and having input and seeing results of your effort, it really makes you feel like, okay, I'm having an effect. I can help change the future. I don't have to feel so overwhelmed. That certainly is part of it too. I mean, if we can, the more that we can engage locally, the better. That's what we're trying to do constantly. Let's talk about the events associated with Sustainability and Resiliency Week. Any of them that stand out for you that you're most excited about?
It's a little hard for me to pick a favorite. I wouldn't really pick a favorite between my kids. But we have what I love is that we have a variety of events, which is basically at the heart of the week, to show the diversity and the number of people involved. But we have a mix this year. We have a little bit more variety of in-person and virtual, which is nice. So, for example, we have the Climate Finance Summit on Monday and the Ensuring the Future event on Tuesday, which are both in person. And then we have a bunch of virtual webinars. We have update to the state building code. We have one on nature-based solutions. We have one on the latest climate report from Yukon Circa that's updating the 2019 scientific report on the impacts of climate change, or the predicted changes, I should say. But those are just a sample of the programs that are getting added every day. So I hope that folks will find something that they like. And if they don't this year, maybe they can join us and host something next year.
Sure. It's a process. And every year we try to engage more and more, more and more people have a greater and greater awareness. We're doing ours. We're having an event on October 1st. We're going to be involving staff from Senator Murphy's office. He's going to come. They are going to come. Senator Murphy couldn't make it, but his staff, lovely people, very knowledgeable. They're going to come and talk about what's happening on the ground in Washington and how it relates to what we're doing here in the state. So that's ours on October 1st. Hope everybody makes that too. And like I said, there are a whole bunch of others. And give us that, and where they can find them is at that website. Give us that website again.
portal.ct.gov.
Yeah.
/sustainability.
Excellent. So if you go there, there's a bunch of events listed, more and more each day, right? People are starting finally.
Yes, that's detailed. They're getting finalized.
It takes a while to get people to get all this stuff together, and then we put it up there. Excellent. Let's talk about the differences between inland and coastal resilience planning, aside from, as we touched on it earlier, this notion that, the coastal cities in Connecticut face, much different issues than do the inland towns and cities. But there are some commonalities in what they have to do and how they have to respond to climate change. Let's talk about the differences between those and what they might have in common. What do you think?
Yeah, sure. In Connecticut, we have obviously a pretty big diversity in density. So we have some very dense communities along the shoreline, and then we have some dense communities inland. So I think that we could slice the pie a couple of different ways. So the communities on the shoreline are obviously dealing with the brunt of the hurricane risk. That doesn't mean that the rest of the state is immune to the hurricane risk, but they usually take on the brunt of it. And they'll have some different flooding impacts, like saltwater intrusion. We're worried about groundwater wells, and those are impacts from saltwater intrusion or impacts to septic systems from saltwater. That might be something that we'll have to be concerned about. And then heat is a little bit different because that's more focused on just generally urbanized areas. Although the coastal communities might have a little bit less extension of the heat, and they might not hit the exact high temperatures as the inland communities because they'll have a little bit of more airflow at the coast. But I think that the resilience planning can come down to resources and capacity, whether you're inland or you're coastal. And it's really just about, you usually have the staff that knows your impacts and they're very trained in them. And then climate change is going to amplify them, essentially.
Right.
And so there might be the more urbanized communities have in-house staff. They'll have planners, they'll have GIS, they'll have full-time emergency management directors. They'll have a more robust public works department, whereas the smaller communities might not have that. And they might be sharing people among multiple communities, that they might get overstretched when things are happening, or they might not be able to do all of the work and think about stuff outside of the day-to-day, or they're having to do that on top of their regular hours. So I think that's the capacity is less inland versus coastal, but the impacts are a little bit different.
Yeah. We touched on this earlier, but just your 50,000 foot philosophy in terms of how do we get people to understand that it is a statewide problem that requires a statewide response with resources, to find a spin on it, money. So coastal towns have their own unique problems. In inland towns, I learned all about riparian zones, which are the zones abutting major rivers, or even not some abutting rivers and creeks. And, that zone is really fragile and very important for sustainability and climate mitigation. And we have a major river that runs through the middle of the state. So it's going to affect a lot of towns throughout the state. And whether or not they're in floodplains, and how these especially the smaller communities with their limited tax base, can actually afford to mitigate for climate change in the future, and how it requires a statewide response. How do we talk to voters? How do we talk to taxpayers throughout the state to get them to understand, everybody's in this together? How do we do that? I think it's a conundrum. People are very locally oriented, and they want their tax dollars to go to the street in front of their house. And that's totally reasonable. I totally get that. But at some point, we have to have a broader view about this, don't you think?
I might have a little bit of a different approach that just because I happen to work for the executive branch, and therefore I have to think about this constantly, for sure. But I think I would ask folks to think about their circle of their life. Like where do you go grocery shopping? Where's your job? Where do your kids go to school or higher education, or where are your kids working, or your cousin? Your life isn't only within your municipal boundaries.
That's a great way of looking at it.
And so you have so many more connections to your impact. And maybe it's 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, 6 degrees of climate in Connecticut, but you're actually something that happens 3 towns over has a significant impact on your day-to-day life. That might, if they get impacted by flooding, that might mean that the highways close down and you can't get to your job. Or that might mean that your kid's daycare is closed because if they don't have air conditioning and the temperature is reaching the 90s and they can't provide a safe space for them. Or you might lose your job due to climate impacts. For example, if it's especially for in the more places that are on the front lines, essentially, in maybe in a marine dependent business, for example, So impacts, you will feel them, whether you are directly impacted. But the chances of you not being directly impacted is increasingly smaller very quickly.
Yeah. With the increasing intensity of storms attributable to climate change, one of the ways I connect with people about this idea is that there are wildfires in the West, where there's flooding in New Orleans, or there's, whatever that might be going on nationally. We as Americans, as not just citizens of Connecticut, but we are all in this together as well. It's not as if we can ask, the city of New Orleans or the state of even the state of California, or anyone affected in a specific area to carry the weight. To be able to fix everything. We have to share resources to be able to, because we're going to have our own issues, and we're going to depend on them as well to help us out. So it's kind of a give and take. We're all in this together mentality. As long as we're on the subject, so I'm going to jump a little bit. The common thought is that, climate doesn't respect state borders. It doesn't respect town borders. So what we do in Connecticut affects, our neighbors. What they do affects us as well. And certainly on the town level, it's true. So what is Connecticut doing to work collaboratively with our neighbors, or even nationally, to promote sustainability and resiliency? I know it's not just all us, not all about us.
No, and it can't be all us. And often a lot of folks are like, why bother since we're so small? But if we wanted to continue that nutrition analysis, so if somebody is not doing something healthy, does that mean you also shouldn't? It just doesn't. Or, as your mom used to say, like, if somebody else jumps off a bridge, should you also? It's not quite.
Yes, my mother used to say that.
Yeah. It doesn't seem like a good way to make decisions just because if somebody else is doing a worse job. I think we always want to do a better job, right? That we can, to make sure that we're protecting Connecticut and all the whole big picture of it. And that doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it. We should be doing it. We should be making sure we're doing our part to help the future of the state. But Connecticut's been working regionally and nationally for a very long time, actually. But you know what? I know we're small, but we're an innovative, and we're an ambitious and forward-thinking state. So, for example, 2001, Connecticut signed on to the New England Governors and Eastern Canadian Premiers Climate Action Plan. And we also were a founding member of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative in the early 2000s. And Governor Jody Reynolds signed the Global Warming Solutions Act in 2008, thinking ahead and setting our targets that we're still going by. We've revised them as the science has evolved. But we've been thinking about this for a long time as a state and how we fit into the region. And this type of cooperation continues today. We're working with our neighboring states and federal agencies wherever we can. And sometimes we work with the governor and a relevant commissioner. We'll do some negotiating on behalf of our state for things like transmission lines, for example. Since we can produce some in-house, and we also might need to import some energy, we need to make sure that we're working with New York and Massachusetts and all the way up to all across New England to make sure that we can get the energy we need. Or even transportation corridors. Those are things that we have to think about as we look forward to rail and additional high-speed or improved public transportation. Connecticut was successful in winning the Clean Corridor Coalition grants through the carbon pollution reduction grants. We're working with New Jersey, Delaware, and Maryland to deploy medium and heavy-duty vehicle charging infrastructure for freight electrification along the I-95 corridor. So this type of interstate coordination, particularly for the trucking industry, is the only way forward to increase range confidence and decrease emissions from this. It's a very large contributing sector to transportation. So this interstate coordination is important. And we work with also national focus organizations and facilitators to learn what other states are doing. And, a good idea is a good idea. And if it works in Connecticut, we don't necessarily have to think of it first. Like, we should make sure that we apply it to Connecticut and use it. And we're not the only state worried about energy generation and cost and where to site it and who pays for it. There are things that we're working with our partners across the country on.
Sure. And I hear you. We certainly punch above our weight as it
We
were.
sure do. We sure do.
Which is very cool. We also get help and support. I mean, it goes two ways. We're out there helping and supporting and leading regionally. We also, as you said, good ideas come from everywhere, and we benefit from those from other states as well. So absolutely true. Let's take a break a second. We'll come right back, and we'll keep chatting. We'll be right back.
We'll return to our program in just a moment. You've been listening to The Impact, a Sustainable CT podcast. Be sure to join us for our September coffee hour on September 18th. It's all about sacred and the profane. Hell yeah. Join the Interreligious Eco Justice Network, Eversource, and United Illuminating for a webinar on energy-efficient programs that will help your house of worship reduce energy usage and costs. Our presenters will be Ricky Rosa from United Illuminating and Alan Lundgren from Eversource. That's Thursday, September 18th at 10 a.m. Remember, you can join Sustainable CT for virtual informal discussions most third Thursdays of each month. We share program updates and resources, explore your questions, and strengthen the network of Sustainable CT champions. Yes, we do. These sessions are free and open to all. I want to remind everybody, too, that September 21st is Sunday. That's right. Come together with communities from across Connecticut as we and people all around the world celebrate the unstoppable rise of clean, renewable energy. Sunday marks a global day of action to uplift the power of solar and wind energy that can power our world without pollution. Speakers, music, art, activities for all ages, exhibitors, and lots of solar info. Free and open to all. Sunday, September 21st, 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. at Central Connecticut State University, 1615 Stanley Street in New Britain. And heavens, don't miss our special Sustainability and Resiliency Week webinar, an update from Senator Chris Murphy's office. Sustainable CT will be joined by staff from Senator Murphy's office for an update on the federal landscape related to sustainability and climate change initiatives. Senator Murphy has a 97% lifetime approval rating from the League of Conservation Voters. He has authored, sponsored, or co-sponsored major environmental legislation, including the Super Pollutants Act, focusing on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. This webinar seeks to make a clear-eyed assessment of the state of our environmental union and find a positive way forward. October 1st, 2 to 3 p.m. And finally, please do register to come and hit the high notes with us at the Goodspeed Opera House in East Haddam for our 2025 awards celebration on Tuesday, October 28th from 4 to 7 p.m. We'll be honoring all of our 2025 certified towns and a brand new cohort of climate leaders in this beautiful, historic, and folkloric setting. We'd love to have you join us. Register now at where else? SustainableCT.org. Our 2025 award celebration is generously sponsored by Clean Transportation Communities of Southern Connecticut and Envest Asset Management and Casella Waste Management. Thank you, sponsors. Well, enough of that. Now let's get back to the program.
Welcome back. We are talking to Joanna Wozniak-Brown, who is heading up Connecticut's Sustainability and Resiliency Week initiative, which is very cool, coming up towards the end of September, and in which we are participating. Sustainable CT is participating as well. Very good to have her here. She, a veritable font of knowledge, as we've discovered. There are some, speaking of knowledge, there are some big pieces of climate-related legislation in the 2025 legislative session. There's one for mitigation and one for resilience. What did those include? Tell us about those a little bit.
Yeah, it was so nice after the difficulty of the 24 session to have such a coming out of the 2025 session so strong and have legislation on both sides of the coin for mitigation and resilience, like we talked about at the top of the podcast. So it was so great to have partners across. So just like SNR Week, so many partners across the state and working closely with the Environment Committee, and the chairs were great partners talking through what we can accomplish, what needs to wait to next year, or how much can we possibly get done this year. And so it was really exciting to be able to work with them, and I appreciate their leadership on this important topic. So HB 5004, as it was known during session, was a House priority bill. And it was focused on climate change mitigation. And there was a whole host of things. And I'll try to just do high level of both. Otherwise, folks might fall asleep.
Okay.
I won't, because this is exciting for me. But the mitigation bill focused on some revisions to the emissions targets, getting a little bit more specific and setting a sub-target. And then there's some changes to capital planning for state facilities to incorporate a more efficient or decarbonize equipment where possible. Constituting the Connecticut Clean Economy Council that the governor had established in executive order, but now it's in statute, and establishing a heat pump plan, having DAS, the Department of Administrative Services, establish a municipal sustainable purchasing policy for municipalities, evaluating nature-based solutions within state programs, a solar canopy strategic plan, and then some changes to existing programs. There's also our Department of Energy and Environmental Protection will be preparing what's being called the Triple Impact Report that'll find solutions to do all of these three things: lower energy costs, increase resilience, and reduce greenhouse gases.
Yeah.
We know that Connecticut is an expensive place to live, and climate change will make it more expensive. And we have to use our resources effectively and wisely to protect future Connecticut generations and the generations here today, to make sure that we're spending those dollars as best we can. And so that's why we want to find something that can accomplish all three of those things.
Yeah.
Because they're all important.
Yeah. And I agree totally that this was such a much nicer coming out of 2025 than it was 2024. For sure.
Yes. Yes.
there is that on which to hang our hats. I understand you work really closely with the Connecticut Department of Health on issues of sustainability and resiliency. And I wanted to ask you about that. I know that you're not a doctor, you're a medical doctor. You're not a medical doctor. You are a doctor. Right? The caveat that you are not into the medicine side of things, just to get your impression of what some of the profound human health impacts are associated with climate change. They're great. What have been the implications generally you've been watching with respect to climate change?
Oh, yes. Definitely not a medical doctor. I can just Google symptoms, but that's about it.
Like us all.
Yes. But we know that increased temperatures, which they'll mean more high heat days, longer heat waves, and hotter nights. So they're called tropical nights, even though we're in Connecticut, but they're called tropical nights in the climate science. That means that these are going to have huge impacts on folks particularly folks who have notable health risks. People with asthma and pulmonary issues, or children, or the elderly, or our pregnant persons, so that they might have trouble breathing, which is obviously not a medical doctor, but I know that that's pretty important.
That's bad. Yeah.
Yeah, it's bad. And so these temperatures also bring about poor air quality. They amplify it. And so you're getting long-term exposure risk. It's not just those 2 to 3 to 5 heat wave days. And it's especially egregious for folks in environmental justice communities who have less access to air conditioning, greater exposure to compounding issues like in industrial areas, and then less geographic mobility to be able to escape in these locations, particularly during the high heat waves. But flooding, I know we often think about damage to property and also obviously the risk of death. But from a larger public health perspective, it also means mold and loss of temporary or permanent loss of already scant housing. I also know this is not the most exciting part of it, but coming from a little bit more of a wooded area. Also, you don't have to be just a wooded area, but I do worry about vector-borne diseases from ticks and mosquitoes. We're seeing new diseases emerging because they're having more time to develop, and the ticks and mosquitoes are having more. There's not a hard freeze off to kill them, so they're getting to multiple generations happening. And then we have the ones that are typically thought of as tropical diseases or the southern U.S. They're knocking on our door, and that's why surveillance programs and social programs and outreach to vulnerable populations are also a part of the climate solution. And so public health is a part of resiliency.
Sometimes we live this kind of idyllic life in many respects in small town Connecticut, even big town Connecticut. It's a beautiful place to live. And then one day you walk outside and the sky is full of Canadian wildfire smoke. And it's brought home to you suddenly, and it's actually difficult to breathe. And this goes on for days, and this has been happening more often. And people go, oh, now I get it. It's like, okay, if that's what it takes, but that awareness is something that grows over time with their experience of actual event, like droughts that are recurring more and more and more broadly in the state of Connecticut. The burgeoning of ticks, the tick population has just exploded in all the things that attend to that. It's those real life, in your face, day to day events that, yes, there can be a major flood because of a major storm, and everybody goes, "Oh, that was a major 100-year storm. It won't happen again for 100 years." Well, that's not really true anymore. These things are happening more and more often. Life around us is becoming more, I won't say difficult necessarily, but more complex and more challenging with all sorts of unintended consequences down the road because of them. So, and the health aspects of this are very real for sure. So.
Yeah, and the governor's been, like we mentioned before, mitigation and resiliency are two parts of both coins. And so that's why the governor put forward a big resiliency bill too last session. So that was called SB 9 or Public Act 2533 now, which was the governor's proposal. And the Senate took it up as a priority bill, which focused on resiliency so that we can make sure we're building in those proactive things so we can think ahead to all of those risks and make it real to people. Like you said, we experience things on an individual basis or the things that happen in our network. But that means we have to also have our governments thinking that way. And so in the resiliency bill, we're changing a couple of planning related things to make sure that we're aligning the local, regional, and state plans, especially for land use. So municipal comprehensive plans will have to include a climate vulnerability assessment and figure out a way to respond to those impacts. We were talking about the costs of infrastructure and how we're going to pay for that. And that is a huge problem. And so having these planning changes means that the municipalities are going to think about, okay, if our wastewater treatment plan has about 20 more years, and we know that there's going to be 20 inches of sea level rise that is going to be impacting it. Right. Is this the time to move it inland? Can we set aside the funds now so the costs aren't astronomical later? Or do we build some barrier protection to reduce the flooding of it? So we have to think about this ahead of time. And so the bill also created something called the Resiliency Improvement District, which is another financing tool. It's a tax incremental financing tool. Connecticut already has some great financing tools in the form of stormwater authorities and coastal resiliency reserve funds. And so we're basically adding more tools to the toolbox for municipalities to access funds in addition to or in partnership with state grants. And the governor also, and nobody will have forgotten the floods in August 2024 after we lost Connecticut residents in that flood. And the governor heard from many people that they thought that homeowners insurance was going to cover their home, or their business insurance would cover their business, but homeowners insurance doesn't usually cover a flood like that, unfortunately. Right. And so they were caught unaware. And so it's really important for the governor to make sure that people are informed. So now insurance companies and insurance agents, when you buy renters or homeowners insurance, they have to tell folks that they can flood, even if they're not in a flood zone, and that you can buy flood insurance. You don't have to be in a flood zone to buy flood insurance. It's really important for folks to know. We were talking about the 100-year storm, the 1,000-year storm, it doesn't mean that you have the only chance of 1 in 1,000 years. It just means that every year that's the percentage chance.
Yeah, badly named. Yeah,
badly named, but I guess it puts it in human perspective that typically this shouldn't have been happening in your lifetime, but now it is. Yeah. And so now that folks should have a little bit more awareness. And there's some more exciting announcements coming from the Connecticut Insurance Department about sharing some more information ahead of time with folks. So stay tuned on that. But that was the other half of the legislative coin, climate coin.
Yeah, getting people to recognize this problem. You say they won't forget that flood, and that's true. Where did I read? And I'm not going to remember. I have to look it up to do my own fact checking. But I recall reading where the people who went through that are not any more keen on buying flood insurance than they were then. That there was a sense of, disconnect, cognitive disconnect when it came to flood insurance, particularly. Of course, it's not cheap either. So,
if you're not in a flood zone, it's actually not that expensive.
Yeah. Well,
so that's the irony of it.
Yeah,
that sure. you have to do your own family calculation about what investments you can make. And those are choices we can't make for you. Obviously, that's everybody's unique conditions, but
Sure.
everybody should have the chance to know that it's available.
Now, does the state of Connecticut or the governor's office have plans to reach carbon neutrality at some point in the not too distant future? That's always been back and forth. People talk about it's a great phrase, carbon neutrality. And if so, what are the major factors involved in getting there? And the obstacles for that matter?
Yeah, the mitigation piece of legislation established a new goal that not later than January 1st, 2050, emissions will be reduced to an economy-wide net zero level, as long as they're 80% below the level emitted in 2001. And
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and what I think an important phrase there is economy-wide. That's very that presents the challenge, but it also presents the needed action that it takes. We talked about transportation. We've talked about public health. We have to worry about our natural resources and the impacts to ecosystem services. We have to think about agriculture and the important role that it plays in our state in feeding us and as the part of the economy. We have to worry about our infrastructure. We've talked about that. So there's all of these pieces that we have to think about. We're emitting greenhouse gas emissions, and what are the ways that we can reduce them? So it has to happen on all of those different pieces. We can't have just one. We can't just have a decarbonized transportation system and forget about the rest, or vice versa. We have to make sure that we're thinking about all of these. And that's a huge challenge. But the legislation gave us some tools to help with that. So, for example, state agencies could use what's called the social cost of greenhouse gases when they're doing a cost-benefit analysis. And that means that, typically you could say, is it more expensive to do X instead of Y? And that's sort of a business as usual way of doing it. But if you're doing a social cost of greenhouse gases, which is a peer-reviewed process that comes up with a specific number, but that number incorporates the damages or avoided damages related to climate impacts, so that you can make a more well-rounded decision. So agencies can use that in their decision-making. And DEEP is now going to be required to issue a report every 3 years. They've been doing this. They've been a committed partner on this for a long time, but now they're going to make sure they're tracking the emissions reductions and carbon sequestration and offer methods to achieve emissions reductions. I think the key aspect of that is the work is not done. I think it's just always continual improvement. We're going to learn more. We're going to do better. Our infrastructure some infrastructure will come out of life. What can we replace it with? We have to always be on our toes. Schools, they can apply for heat pumps in the non-priority funding through DAS. And DAS is developing that process to fully consider energy efficiency and energy reduction and resilience hub capacity in state facilities. So those are the types of things that we can start doing. And Governor Lamont recognized this in Executive Order 21-3 when he directed many state agencies, I lost count of the number, but to address the issues within their purview. For example, DOT established a vehicle miles traveled target. DAS is revising the building code. There are new specific tasks for Greener Gov, which is led by OPM, DEEP, and DAS. He established the Office of Climate and Public Health in DPH, and a whole bunch of actions. So it's going to take this whole of government approach. It's going to take proactive and interscalar work to do that. So we have tools. I'm sure more tools will come about, and there's more things that we can always use. But I think we're in a stronger position than we might have been, even 5-10 years ago on things that we can do.
I got to say, 2050 seems a long way off to me.
It's not.
And I'm only looking at that because I won't be around to see it. You will probably be around. You're young.
I won't be around to see it.
I don't think 2050 is in my cards. Are you? And we always ask people on the show, are you optimistic that we can do this? Do you think we have the political will and resources, and you think we can do this? You're optimistic about it, that we can get this in hand,
Personally, I don't.
Timely enough fashion.
We have goals. We have statutorily established goals that we are working towards. I don't have a crystal ball, but I also don't have the luxury of thinking we won't.
That's a good point.
People ask me this all the time, but with grant programs change, leadership changes or policy changes or just all of these, that's part of life. All of these factors change. We have a big problem we have to solve. We have to work together to solve it. And so we're going to work towards these goals because inaction is not one of the choices we should make.
Yeah. I mean, and you think we're moving fast enough. I'm thinking about my kids and what they have to face in the future. This is a very personal thing. It's a personal thing to everybody. Certainly not just me. Are we going to be effective enough in a timely enough fashion to avoid the really bigger problems that we're going to be facing if we have inaction and stalemate and political discord? It's hard to remain optimistic. Sometimes I try. I have lots of good people doing great things that I work with, so that keeps me, relatively optimistic. And as you point out, it's almost like part of your job. You have to believe that this is going to work.
That doesn't mean being a head in the sand and pretending there aren't complications, right? I mean, hard work is hard work. It doesn't mean it's not worth doing. And so that's why I'm here. That's why there's a lot of people working on this across the state. And Connecticut, like we said, is a small state, but we've been committed to this issue for decades. And we know this is something that we have to take actions on. So I feel very lucky that I'm in a state with leadership that is focused on these types of issues, whether it's in government or not in government, that is focused on these issues. And so we're just going to keep on keeping on. That's all we're going to do.
Yeah, it's a good philosophy. Personal note, let me ask you, how did you get involved in sustainability? How did you come to this issue? What made you feel like you wanted to get involved in this?
I've been in the environmental industry for a couple decades, and I've had almost every job you could in this space.
Yeah.
Whether it's brownfields remediation, regional water planning, industrial air compliance, all of that policy. So I run the gamut of it. But this was a unique opportunity when this position was created a couple of years ago to jump on it. Although I've been working in the climate space for a while now, so it's you gotta move the opportunities where you can, right? And where you feel like you can be the most.
Sure, but how did you first come to the climate space? What made you interested in being that first job in the climate space? What drew you to it? So this is something that you really wanted to be involved with.
Well, I've always wanted to be involved in environmental issues from school. Being the president of the environmental club.
So good education. That's what
good education counts. I love trees. I advocate for tree hugging. Check for poison ivy first, though. That's a perfect tip. So I think it's just always been really important to me, and this is one of the greatest challenges today and into the future. And I want to be a part of the solution.
Well, thank goodness you did. We are certainly better for it, for your involvement and your passion and your organizational skill and energy that you bring to this. So, Joanna, thank you very much for everything you've done and for being here today. This is great. Our time is up, and I've enjoyed it immensely. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I hope folks will join us at one of the events for Sustainability and Resiliency Week. So check out portal.ct.gov/sustainability, and you can check out the events. You can sign up for our newsletter, and you can see what some state agencies are doing on these topics. So thanks so much.
Excellent. Will do.
We hope you've enjoyed today's edition of The Impact, a Sustainable CT podcast. As always, this program is recorded, produced, and copyrighted, by Sustainable CT. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for listening. Thank you to our sponsor, the Tremaine Foundation. Special thanks to our guest, Joanna Wozniak-Brown, for everything she does to make Connecticut and our world a better place. And thanks to everyone for taking local actions that have a statewide impact.